My friends, I turned away my eyes for 2 seconds, and now Kupiansk is about to fall. I mean, just look at the map. What is this? Kupiansk is this large town in Kharkiv Oblast, one of Russia's main objectives for the summer offensive. As we speak, 4 elements of the Russian 6th Army are already pushing towards the city center. At this rate, Kupiansk could fall within a couple days, maybe a couple weeks. Look, to be honest, I don't know the exact time frame. I'm not in charge of military operations, but expect this to happen soon. And you know it's GG well played for Kupiansk when Ukraine starts bringing forward newly mobilized personnel and territorial defense brigades for the final defense of the city. But as always, who do we call when the city is about to fall? That's right, the 3rd Assault Brigade Azov, and they're coming to Kupiansk. Let's just say the clock is ticking. They better counterattack quickly because the situation is worsening every hour.
All hope is failing, my lord! The battle is almost done!
Anyway, we have a lot in store today, so let's jump right in. Welcome to History Legends, and here are the latest news of the Russo-Ukraine war. If you're new to this channel, make sure to like and subscribe. Thank you to everyone that has already supported the channel on Patreon and PayPal, and welcome to the headquarters. If you're new to this KUPYANSK Saga, I will add the previous episodes in the description below. As a reminder, this was the frontline situation around Kupiansk on the 22nd of August where we last left off. The Russian 6th Command Arms Army, supported by armored elements from the 1st Tank Army, had secured this breachhead west of the Oskol River, and now started to outflank Kupiansk from the northwest. If we zoom in, we can see that the entire northern part of Kupiansk proper was already in the gray zone, aka in contested territory. In this footage, you can see Ukrainian special forces operating in this sector. But then they use Vampire bomber drones to target Russian patrols right here, 500 meters beyond the gray zone along Lenin Street. It's not a surprise that 48 hours later, Deep State UA conceded huge parts of Kupiansk to the enemy. This entire industrial sector in the north and another 2.5-kilometer breakthrough was reported along the western outskirts. Under the weight of enemy progression, a number of Ukrainian rifle squads started abandoning their positions.
Cowards! Our men flee the battlefield!
The situation was critical, especially since Kupiansk was defended by a patchwork of units coming from different army corps. Let's just say, diversity was not their strength. The Ukrainian Operational Command in Kupiansk immediately gathered a Kampfgruppe composed of the 77th Air Assault Brigade and the 15th Operational Brigade Counterattack. They were grouped somewhere here using the cover of these woods. The operation started on the 29th of August with an FPV drone barrage to dismantle enemy resistance. This was immediately followed by an assault by Ukrainian shock units that counterattacked the Russians. This attack also included armored units like this T-72 tank. This operation allowed the AFU to dislodge the enemy and bring back the contact line 4 kilometers all the way up to the R-79 road. This Ukrainian counterattack saved Kupiansk from encirclement. If the AFU could pour enough reserves into this operation, it was now the Russians that could face encirclement. By the 39th of August, Ukrainian troops were spotted right at the center of the settlement of Moskovka, thus confirming the success of their counterattack. But then the Russians said, "Niet." Not even 24 hours later, Russian troops raised the white-blue-red flag and were geolocated right here in Moskovka as well, in the same sector. This goes to show the front line in this sector is not fixed. It's composed of a patchwork of bastions. It's all very fluid. A bit like the Gen Z see themselves. September 2025. Since the Russian 6th Army's fancy flanking operation didn't work, it was time to just shove it in, and then think about the consequences later. But to do so, they needed additional reinforcements. About this on September 1st, this Ukrainian analyst reported, "The enemy still cannot massively bring heavy weapons across the Oskol to the breachhead. Parts of the breachhead are obviously under constant and dense observation and fire control by the AFU. So what the Russians do is that they use rafts and small boats to transfer supplies and infantry from one bank to another. Considering we have zero footage of Ukrainian drone strikes on these embarkations, the dense observation claim is probably BS. A bit like Patel's testimony on the Epstein files. Here's another analysis from Ukrainian journalist Yuri Butusov. He wrote on Telegram, "The enemy regularly uses anti-thermal cloaks, so assault attempts occur around the clock. The main task of the enemy infantry is to reach cover in the gray zone for further accumulation, then try to move between forward positions, avoiding direct assault actions. The most important indicator has become the increase in the drone component in attempts to strike our logistical routes. And this works. Because of Ukraine's shortage of infantry, the solution was to mass drones on the contact line for recon and striking purposes. But now Russian troops found stratagems to infiltrate through enemy lines without being detected by UAVs. In the early hours of September 3rd came shocking news for the Ukrainian garrison. Russian patrols were spotted raising their colors 1,700 meters beyond the contact line, right outside the city center. They were also geolocated here, next to the Spartak Stadium, here at the city electrical substation, and here near the TV tower on the 1st of May Street. However, in my opinion, all these flag demonstrations are part of PR stunts, like some sort of maskirovka, to spread chaos and doubt in Ukrainian ranks. That's another stratagem, psychological warfare. Perhaps this can push the defenders to abandon their fortifications without a fight. Many pro-Russian mappers frantically started adding all these sectors to Russian-controlled territory. But this will be disproven in a moment, because it's very easy for individual soldiers to raise the flag at a certain moment while being recorded by a drone and then just vanish. Doesn't mean the entire area is actually secured. But if they did this, it also means the Ukrainian front had a lot of gaps. As you know, Ukrainian drone teams are the units that can inflict the highest number of casualties on Russian formations. So the key for Russian assault detachments is to eliminate enemy drone operators before they can strike your troops. That's how a Russian helicopter fired a missile right into a Ukrainian UAV control point somewhere in Kupyansk. And in this other footage, it's a mobile UAV unit that was spotted and then destroyed. And in honor of the Battle of Grozny, Russian aviation launched an FAB festival on large buildings across the city. Now, because the Russian 6th Command Arms Army north of Kupyansk doesn't operate armored vehicles, their infantrymen have no other choice but to deal with enemy threats by themselves. Nonetheless, in these conditions, storming fortified bastions and strongholds might become very difficult without tanks that can provide direct fire support. I guess if you don't have access to that, you can just crawl right behind the enemy, but no spoilers. On the 5th of September, we have footage of Ukrainian FPV drone strikes on Russian troops in the residential sector near the Sports Square neighborhood. As you can see, these storm detachments were edging right at the limit of the current gray zone. It was just a matter of time before they would release onto the rest of the city. However, the Ukrainians are not the only ones operating UAVs. Although the Russians are a bit behind in terms of drone warfare, they're catching up fast. In this video, we see a Russian recon drone lurking over two Ukrainian soldiers. We learn those are machine gunners trying to set up their MG nest in a high-rise building. They got ambushed by a fiber optics drone just camping in front of the door, and GG well played. If it's true that the Russian 6th Command Arms Army had trouble bringing heavy equipment across the river in support of its offensive, Ukraine also faced difficulty when dispatching reinforcements towards Kupyansk. Any vehicles moving in and out of the city were systematically engaged and neutralized. The drone operators of the Russian 68th Division established some sort of interdiction zone, effectively disrupting enemy movement. A Russian telegram channel even declared, "The sky over Kupyansk is completely controlled by our birds." Oh yeah, did you notice how Russian drone operators mostly target enemy vehicles, while the Ukrainians primarily target infantry? I don't want to sound like Captain Obvious, but I found this contrast pretty revealing. One side focuses on targeting logistics and the other focuses on targeting manpower. On the 7th of September, Russian telegram channels reported that the Ukrainians launched a counterattack along Michurina Street aboard Humvees. This was geolocated right here in the northeastern part of Kupyansk, close to the Oskol River. And if we refer to these pro-Russian mappers, this fell well inside their supposed area of control. Turns out there was a first Russian drone strike that made the house catch fire. Some Ukrainian soldiers inside were wounded, and what you see here is actually a medevac team, not an assault squad part of a counterattack. And it makes sense, it's only one Humvee without any type of support. This also confirms that by the 7th of September, DFU was still in control of this entire sector. The next day, this Ukrainian analyst declared that the Russian 6th Command Arms Army received strict orders from the general staff to break into the city at all costs and secure a foothold there as soon as possible. I don't know where he got that intel from, but it could be true, especially considering the quagmire in Pokrovsk and Kostiantynivka. On the 9th of September, Russian aviation bombarded multiple high-rise buildings on the east side of Kupyansk. But I wonder why, especially considering Russian troops are still 5 to 6 kilometers away from these positions. Probably just what they call a concentration point. Perhaps this could indicate preparatory strikes to weaken Ukraine positions on the east bank of Kupyansk. Although the situation around Kupyansk sort of stabilized in this first week of September, everything suddenly crumbled by the 12th. All the Ukrainian units still holding their trenches and dugouts in this salient had to quickly evacuate. As Russian forces advanced 1,500 meters, secured these two forests, and pushed right into Kindrashivka. This was tactically important, as these gains secured Russian supply lines going from Kupyansk all the way to Dvorichna and LYMAN. We can also notice this 1-kilometer progression inside the north of Kupyansk, an area with numerous large buildings and warehouses that could be used as a stepping stone for the storming of the city. After this double penetration, the Russians still had some energy left and pushed the tip of their forces a little bit deeper. That's how on the 13th of September they expanded once again their area of control all along the Davidova-Luchiskoho street. But something else happened that day. Russian soldiers respawned from the ground. What sort of cheat code is that? Don't believe me? Take a look at it yourself. This guy with red markings pops out of this hole and then drags a huge bag into the tree line. Could it be that? No. Yes! Operation Pipeline number 3. The General Staff of the Armed Forces of Ukraine confirmed the fact that the Russian armed forces used a gas pipeline to transfer personnel near Kupyansk.
Again!
Unfortunately for the Russians, the pipeline didn't lead right into the city center. The exit was located in this area north of Kupyansk and ran all along this path into Liman Pershi. At least this time, the Ukrainians placed barbed wire inside the pipeline to prevent another surprise in their rear. And apparently, all the other pipelines were flooded, just in case. Good, that means they're learning. Here you can see Russian soldiers clearing the path and using a trolley to bring equipment and supplies forward. Allegedly, the operation was carried out by men of the 60th Air Assault Brigade veterans, the same ones that participated in the storming of Suja in March 2025. Look, you can be pro-Ukraine, but you have to give it to Russian troops. They get very creative at war. It's not a surprise that the next day, on the 13th of September, reports indicated that elements of the 3rd Assault Brigade Azov started redeploying from Liman towards Kupyansk. This means that the Ukrainian command intends to hold the city at all costs, but this also severely weakens the Ukrainian front in Liman. If you're interested, it's the video right before that one. The link will be in the description below. Check out how Kanashevich, the head of Ukraine's Kupyansk city military administration, how he's coping so hard to the Ukrainian media.
Немає росіян в Куп'янську, дійсно бої точаться на околицях. До цього моменту жодних там успіхів.
Okay, bro, I mean, just look at the map. On the 14th of September, another Russian helicopter struck a Ukrainian UAV control point. These guys can't catch a break. They keep getting sniped by air-to-surface missiles. By the 15th of September, the situation kept deteriorating for our beloved Ukrainskaya Armia. The entire northern part of Kupyansk fell into the gray zone. This was confirmed by the following drone strikes by the Ukrainian 116th Mechanized Brigade against Russian patrols. Using modern deep state UA standards, that means all this territory has effectively been lost. Maybe not fully under Russian control, but it's certainly not fully in Ukrainian hands either. This means that in theory, from the tip of the spearhead, Russian storm detachments were only 900 meters away from the city center of Kupyansk. The Ukrainian command simply couldn't send reinforcements to stop the enemy progression. Russian drone operators of the 27th Brigade 1st Tank Army destroyed a pickup, an APC, and a Russian senator. During their hunt, they also immobilized and destroyed a Novator infantry mobility vehicle. This confirms what we talked about earlier. The Russians primarily target vehicles rather than riflemen alone. But the question is why? Is it because of a deliberate strategy or because they don't have that many drones and have to prioritize their targets? Let me know in the comment section what you think. The Battle of Kupyansk took a sharp turn on the 16th of September. As usual, we have footage of a Ukrainian bomber drone targeting Russian troops. However, this happened right here on the western side of Kupyansk. Later that day, Deep State UA conceded huge parts of the city to the enemy. Looks almost as bad as the Louisiana Purchase. Russian troops advanced along the eastern side of the R-79 road and secured these high-rise buildings 300 meters beyond the Spartak Stadium. Simultaneously, they also progressed to the west along Sadova Street and the railway line. The main Ukrainian strongholds preventing the complete collapse of the city were these dozen high-rise buildings, this other set of commie blocks, the hospital, and the train station. However, to properly defend all these positions, you need a lot of infantry. Not just former Fortnite players turned into FPV drone operators. You need physical control of the area, riflemen, which the Ukrainians don't have. What are they gonna do? At the same time, packing a lot of infantry into one building could be dangerous. As you can see in this footage, Russian aviation was already blessing the southern part of Kupyansk. On the 18th of September, Deep State UA finally acknowledged the loss of these forests between Kindarashivka and Karinove. This also means we can expect a big battle for Kindarashivka in the coming days. Other reports indicated additional Russian gains along Sadova Street, as well as on Lenin and Michorina streets in the lowlands. Hold on, actually that explains why the Russians are advancing so rapidly in this direction. With all their infantrymen, they started infiltrating the lowlands, and from there they can flank Ukrainian positions from below, through the wooden ridgeline and clear one block after another. And using this very simple tactic, they can literally creep their way forward up to the city center. 24 hours later, a Ukrainian patrol also carefully advanced to the city center of Kupyansk to show that the AFU was still firmly in control of the situation. Yeah, nothing screams more in control than this. Now, for those that are still watching, comes the ultimate plot twist. On the 19th of September as well, the Kyiv Independent released this shocking article. Ex-Ukrainian officer commands Russian offensive on Kupyansk. I'm still shocked by this. This is a Game of Thrones moment. We can read, Russian forces attempting to advance on the town of Kupyansk are led by former Ukrainian officer Serhiy Storozhenko. Storozhenko, born in Kharkiv Oblast in 1975, spent most of his career in the Ukrainian army. After the Russian takeover of Crimea in 2014, with half his men, around 600 personnel, he defected to Russia and received Russian citizenship soon after. In 2023, Russian President Vladimir Putin promoted Storozhenko to lieutenant general and appointed him commander of the 6th Command Arms Army. So we have a Russian-born commanding the armed forces of Ukraine, and a Ukrainian-born leading this offensive. Yeah, this is truly a civil war. According to the latest news, by the 20th of September, the Grey Zone expanded some more. As you can see, Russian storm detachments of the 6th Army are about to encircle the high-rise building districts in the north. And active fighting is now taking place at all Ukrainian strongholds simultaneously.
All hope is failing, my lord!
Now the question is, what can we expect next? As you can see, this Ukrainian grouping in the high-rise buildings is getting encircled. So unless the Ukrainian command can organize a counterattack, they will eventually have to withdraw. In that case, we can expect the Ukrainians to fortify the area south of the railway line along the PO7 road linking both banks of the Oskol River. That means we can also expect heavy fighting in the city center of Kupyansk. Meanwhile, the Russians will concentrate on clearing the northern part of Kupyansk, and if they have enough forces, they will try to outflank the remaining Ukrainian forces by putting pressure on the southwestern part of the city, in order to force the defenders out of the city center. In the end, only a Ukrainian counterattack against Kindarashivka could halt the Russian momentum in Kupyansk. Anyway, as we know, Kupyansk has no strategic importance whatsoever. That's all I have for you today. Let me know in the comment section what you thought of my analysis. If you're new to this channel, make sure to like and subscribe. And if you want to support my work, make sure to check out my Patreon or PayPal. The links are in the description below.